Offensive action in Iraq rarely gets any more intense. This battery of Paladins, 155 millimeters in all, has fired more rounds in its first 4 months than a nearby smaller battery has fired in the last 15 months.
Yeah, that fucking worked.
This way, it'll blow.
Down the right alley.
Oh, look at that, man.
That was like a fucking Happy Gilmore shot.
I'm a goddamn professional.
All around the country, U.S. and Iraqi troops are moving into regions previously ignored by coalition forces.
Hopefully don't start shooting at us from the left side.
This southeast Baghdad neighborhood called Mechanics Elbow hasn't had an Iraqi or American presence for months, after forces were redeployed to battle al-Qaeda in neighborhoods to the north. That left the people here to their wits and the mercy of the militias and terrorists.
Hooligan.
Hooligan.
There's not enough Iraqi army units to go around, so these cavalry soldiers work the neighborhood on their own. House by house, the soldiers fan out, looking for signs of terrorists and their supporters. All homes are searched, and all fighting-aged males are questioned and then tested for explosives residue.
Come on, come on, come on! Yellow.
Who's got the hooligan?
It's open.
Taking the fight back to the terrorist home court is the end result of a new strategy underway in Iraq. It's freeing up U.S. troops and allowing them to go on the offensive against al-Qaeda in Iraq. After a tough summer for the terrorists and a lackluster Ramadan offensive, U.S. commanders say the group is highly disorganized and on the run. A lot of the recent success, commanders believe, starts here in small Sunni villages across Iraq that have had enough of the killing. By the hundreds, local men, scores of whom had been attacking U.S. forces at one time or another, are now turning their eyes, ears, and guns toward al-Qaeda. The new approach has several names. The most common being used is concerned citizens. It's a program with direct roots to the successful Anbar Awakening movement that has dramatically slowed the violence in such areas as Ramadi and Fallujah to just a trickle. Since early summer 2007, the program has been quickly spreading east to areas surrounding Baghdad and beyond. The Shia-led government has been resistant to recognize these groups the closer they are to the city of Baghdad, so the U.S. military is bypassing the government and is working directly with local Iraqis in their own campaign toward reconciliation with the disenfranchised Sunni minority. Iraqi sheikhs and the people they represent are coming to the conclusion that they have more to gain by supporting the Americans versus the heavy-handed and often deadly edicts handed out by al-Qaeda. Several military intelligence officers say the Iraqis are finally understanding that the quickest way to get rid of the Americans and reclaim their lives is to help the Americans get rid of al-Qaeda and its supporters. First, sheikhs are signed on with the promise of funding to support the local security group. The sheikh then recruits men from his area to man the plethora of checkpoints that will soon become the eyes and ears of the Americans. The men are screened, fingerprinted, receive a biometric scanning, and a basic health physical before being vetted into the program. Once they have been accepted using their own weapons, the men work as local security in the areas where they and their families live. Besides helping lower U.S. combat deaths, American leaders on the ground believe they're addressing several issues at once with this approach. It's allowing them to build extensive intelligence networks. It's pumping money into the economy by giving jobs to the unemployed. It's also allowing Americans to turn over sections of land to trusted local leaders, giving commanders more room to maneuver their own forces better.
Well, the Concerned Citizen program is not a cure-all for the problems here in Iraq. Reconciliation between the U.S. military and the many domestic fighters that oppose it is certainly a step in the right direction. Reporting for the Long War Journal, I'm David Tate, Baghdad, Iraq.
Hey folks, it's Uncle Jimbo, and I'm talking here with Bill Roggio, whose company, Public Multimedia, just sent himself and videographer David Tate to Baghdad and the surrounding areas to see what was going on. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the Concerned Citizens programs and some of the other things you saw there, Bill?
Yeah, sure. David Tate and I embedded in southern Baghdad province. We also spent a little bit of time in Baghdad as well through the month of September. The Concerned Citizen program is basically an extension of what happened in Anbar province. We have tribal leaders and former insurgent groups that are banding together in their neighborhoods. They're putting together neighborhood watch or auxiliary police forces, and they're securing their neighborhoods. It's a vital program, and it is the first step forward in reconciliation, because the goal of these concerned citizens of these local groups is eventually to join the police forces, as well as or join the army or become local police forces themselves. In the region that we were in, it was the region that used to be known as the Triangle of Death, south of Baghdad and Haswa, Mahmudiyah, Iskandariya region. There was somewhere around 20,000 concerned citizens the last number I heard, and as well as in a region called Arab Jabor, there's about 700 concerned citizens there. This was a region where Al-Qaeda was staging many of its attacks into Baghdad city. So it's vital. These groups, Al-Qaeda basically did what they did in the rest of the country. They killed and tortured and intimidated much of the population for not adhering to their rules or submitting to their Islamic State in Iraq. And these insurgent groups and tribes have seen enough, and they honestly are looking to move forward.
I think the Anbar awakening is going to be seen as the turning point in the Iraq War, when the Sunni sheiks in that region changed their alliance from Al-Qaeda to that of their own country's government and its ally, the U.S. forces. It completely changed the region and gave the insurgents no place to hide. Now, this is a new area and a completely new set of people. Is the same thing happening, or is this a mixed Sunni and Shia region, and it's...
Yes, in this region, in the southwestern portion of Baghdad province, it's a mixed Sunni and Shia region. This is the area where, when they talk about sectarian fault lines, this is one of those areas that they're talking about. And we've been in a town called Al-Haswa. I was at the two recruits, and it was mixed Sunni Shia. Also in Arab Jabor, this recruiting drive was held in the home of a Shia sheikh, and I noticed the names on the list. There was like Al-Anbari, Dolami, and I'm going, those are Shia tribal names. I'm sorry, Sunni tribal names. And so I asked the sheikh, I said, is it Shia, is it Sunni? He said it's both. There's probably about 50-50, 60-40 Shia Sunni. So I really think that this whole Sunni Shia division is far more overplayed here than it exists in Iraq. I mean, what we had really was Al-Qaeda and the Mahdi army on the other extreme stirring up this pot. But when it comes down to it, Iraqi, Sunni, and Shia have lived side by side for centuries.
So absent those, I guess, incendiary, groups such as Al-Qaeda and, the Iranian-supported militias on the Shia side, the possibility exists that the rest of Iraq has grown disgusted enough with the violence generated by those groups that they're willing now to be neighbors rather than sectarian enemies.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that what you've seen particularly on the Sunni side is a war weariness. This was detectable in interviews with sheikhs. It certainly is possible. Look, the government has a lot of work to do. The reconciliation that we described, this concerned citizens groups and the things that are happening at the district and provincial level. Those are very encouraging signs. The government has to make the next step and allow some of these groups to become part of official security forces. When that can happen, when that does happen, I think that'll be your next major step with the reconciliation. I do believe it will. I mean, I think it's crazy for us to expect that, one day air regions have been violent and major attacks are occurring. And basically what really happened with the surges, the next day the violence really basically switches off in a lot of these areas as these groups rise up. And then there's still areas that are being cleared, plenty of areas, a lot of work to be done. I think it's insane for us to think that the Shia-led government is going to all of a sudden just say, oh, that's fine, we're going to accept these former insurgents. They need to, these concerned citizen groups, they need to keep the peace and keep it for a while and build the trust with the government. This is a process. It's not an event, as Glenn Reynolds would always say.
Continuing our conversation with Bill Roggio, who publishes the Long War Journal, about his and David Tate's trip to Baghdad and the areas surrounding it, just recently in September of this year. One of the mistakes we made initially was attempting to impose a national solution from a central Baghdad government that would then cascade down through regional and then down to local government and provide security and reconstruction. Corruption at a national level stopped that, and a lack of a security solution stopped that. Now, given that we have shifted to a COIN strategy, counterinsurgency, where we're working from the local level, establishing trust, building rapport with the local people, and sharing their sacrifices, how can we now take that success at the local level and parlay it into an ability for the national government to actually provide for the people on a larger level? Right now, the impression seems to be that the money that gets spent or created by oil or whatever goes to Baghdad and then is skimmed off and sent to Kuwait or wherever and never makes it to anybody who could actually use it. What can we do now to ensure that aid at a national level gets pushed down to the local level?
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to say I fully agree with your point. I think both in Iraq and in Afghanistan we've made the mistake of looking at this from a top-down level. And, with the military and the Department of State, it's kind of natural. This is the way these organizations work, big bureaucracies. But I think we finally cracked the code on this, and we are working at the local level. What you have now is you have like the SERP program. You have, which is basically the commanders have discretionary payments they can make at the local level. That fixes the things that people really need in these towns, like getting their irrigation systems fixed so they could farm again. It's going to take a lot of work to resolve the problems at the national level as far as what corruption. We're always going to have a level of corruption. Look, we have corruption here in the United States. In the Middle East, it's a much more prevalent type of system to have corruption in it. I think we'll accept a certain level of that. The key is that if these people could get their water pumps back on and their water filtration on, they could get back to farming, they could get their roads fixed, get the IEDs dug out of the road, getting, things of that nature. They're not looking for a whole ton, get some electricity back on or get some fuel. They're not looking for a whole ton of work to be done. It can be done at the local level. That's how we're working it right now. And the Iraqi government, in some cases, particularly in Anbar, has distributed money from the government to the provincial level, and it's starting to filter its way down. Again, this is really a process and not an event. It's going to take time to fix these things.
In the third segment of our talk with Bill, we'll discuss how impressions of American intentions within the region affect our ability to conduct operations and ultimately prevail. In President Bush's second inaugural speech, he spoke a lot about how our goals in the Middle East involve spreading democracy to folks who had never experienced any type of really a free society. Now, we're in a position now where we're either going to prove that in one way or other, right or wrong. If we manage to maintain our efforts and the current success that we're having, and a stable democracy springs up in the Middle East, that stands as a pretty strong reminder to everybody that we are not imperialists, that we are not there to steal the oil, that we're there to take out a tyrant and then enable the Iraqi people to live freely. Now, that's a noble goal, and that's something I think that has been forgotten given that we weren't succeeding. If we don't succeed, we don't get to claim that we spread democracy. It looks now like we have the possibility of success in view, and consequently, we need to consider now the ramifications of victory in Iraq and how that affects our efforts, to maintain a U.S. credibility worldwide.
Yeah, absolutely. It is very important. Well, actually, let me step back here. I think one of the main reasons that we've received your support over time, or this time around, is the Iraqis, I think, do recognize that we are not there and there to stay. They watch our news. They see the debate here in the United States. When they start getting wind that we're going to pull out, when they think that that's going to happen, it really changed some minds over there. I think if there's one positive thing that you could have out of that horrific debate that we had in the spring, if you could even call it the debate, is that the Iraqis, I think they actually understood that we may actually be leaving, and what they realized is that while we may be leaving, Al Qaeda may not. So I think that they started looking at Al Qaeda and the foreign terrorists, and looking at it also as Iran as being far more imperialist than the United States. That was, I think, a major turning point. And once we get in there, we build the trust at the local level. As you said, it's very important to do this at the grassroots level. When a commander, when a captain or a colonel, lieutenant colonel can get a project worked on and get it completed, when we're paying their guys to police their neighborhoods, to dig up IEDs, to do things of that nature, we're building the trust. They bring us something, we reward them. They come to us and say, I sat in on meetings with tribal leaders where all in the same breath we're talking about security and getting water pumps fixed and getting irrigation systems fixed and getting canals dredged and things of that nature. All of those things are happening all at once, and it really does build trust at the local level. Again, a crucial part of this is getting it, from the district to the province, and then getting it from the province up to the national government, or actually coming downward from the national government to the province to the district. I think we can get the district and the provincial levels. In some places we have those problems, I don't want to say solved, but they're well on their way. That real gap is between the central government. But, we're working around that. The United States is working around that by writing the checks that need to be written. And some people will say, oh, great, you're paying former insurgents to be security guards or whatnot. Well, the U.S. troops' deaths are down. What does that cost? In not just material costs, but in the cost of...
Well, that's a price I'll pay. I'll tell you right now. If we can get those same folks who before were putting their effort and energy into killing our troops and give them skin in the game, let them figure out that guarding their own stuff is better than killing us, well, I'm all for it.
This is how you win an insurgency. You have them point their guns elsewhere or lay them down and join the process. And in this case, they're joining the process and they're pointing their guns against Al Qaeda. I've seen that firsthand. In one unit I was with, there was a group they called the Bird Dogs. There was four. This was in the Arab Jabur region. 4 Iraqis assigned to the U.S. They're working their telephones. I was in this unit for maybe a half hour, and the colonel told me about these guys. They're Iraqi tribals. They live with them. They act as their local intelligence network. They're working the telephones. They actually go out to the community. They identify where Al Qaeda is. And when I was there, within a half hour, they identified a mortar launch location that we confirmed via a Predator, of some type of air UAV support. And they gave us the exact coordinates because 2 of these guys knew how to read maps. So, and we took out like 10 Qaeda that night. So that's game on right there. That's how you win this game.
The final segment of our talk with Bill will discuss the endgame. What conditions have to exist and what things have to occur before we can fairly say that we have won the war.
That's counterinsurgency, Bill.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's good. You know how good that is for me to hear, because sadly, I kind of assumed, that was our goal all along, and it wasn't. We had other things, and we can talk about that other places, but the fact that now we did adopt a completely different strategy, we did reinforce it, and it has shown concrete, substantial results, to me is heartening beyond belief, and I really appreciate hearing it.
Absolutely. One thing here, I think the Marines had it right in Anbar. The problem was that wasn't going to be sustained when the rest of the U.S. Army wasn't practicing counterinsurgency. So that's why we saw successes, and that's why Anbar is ahead of the game here. What happened in 2006, Al-Qaeda tried to push back, and they had the bases of operations to do it, from the Baghdad belts, from Salahuddin province. So, the key that we're doing this is we're treating Iraq as a holistic problem. So, we're dealing with the entire country of Iraq, putting the pressure on Al-Qaeda and the Shia terrorist groups all at once. And that is showing a real result. And you could see with the news that the U.S. casualties are down. I don't like to use U.S. casualties alone. I don't think it's a good metric. But they are way down. Iraqi casualties are way down. The incidence of mass suicide, major suicide attacks, completely way down. And a lot of progress going on. Some areas are just not appearing in the news anymore. And it's not because these areas have gone dark, but I would say because these areas have gone light. They are
Careful there, Bill. You almost sound optimistic. But you are a pleasant antidote to the always downward spin the mainstream media puts on any story coming out of Iraq. The fact that you're on the ground and the fact that your company, Public Multimedia, at publicmultimedia.org, is sending yourself, Bill Ardolino, and others over to do reporting on stories that would otherwise be ignored is a positive development. So I appreciate you spending some time with us here on Blackfive TV. You can catch us at blackfive.net. And you can find, once again, Mr. Roggio's site is the Long War Journal, where you can find his reports from Iraq and on other conflict areas around the country. That URL is longwarjournal.org. The always informative Bill Roggio. Thanks for taking the time, Bill.
Always a pleasure, Jimbo. Thank you very much.